Hello, Year 6. This is Wednesday, the 24th of February, and we're now on lesson 3 of our 2-week writing unit, where you're going to be writing and publishing a newspaper report that describes a base jumper, Valery Rosov, jumping off Mount Choi Oyu in the Himalayan mountains. So for today's lesson, we're going to be identifying the features of the newspaper report, and you are going to come up with your own checklist. So you will need paper, pencils, the newspaper article on Alain Robert, and the blank checklist that I emailed you yesterday. So if you haven't got that now, I'd stop the video, pop and get it, and then restart the video when you are ready to progress with the lesson. So Year 6, a newspaper report. What is a newspaper? Well, a newspaper is a publication printed on paper and is issued regularly, usually once a day or once a week. It gives information and opinions written by journalists about current events and news. Now, newspapers usually report on a wide range of topics, including current events, politics, celebrity news, crimes, sport, and popular opinions. Now, let's go back to this word that I've underlined here, journalist. You need to know what a journalist is because you are going to be journalists when you're writing. And a journalist is someone who investigates, collects, and presents information as a news story. So you're collecting and presenting information on Valery Rosov's base jump. So, newspapers. What is journalistic writing? Well, this is something that you need to be aware of. Didn't want to do that Year 6, did I? So this is something you need to be aware of when you are actually writing, because journalistic writing is a text written by a journalist. Journalists, as we've already said, collect, write, present, edit, and or comment on news and current affairs. And a news is a recount of current significant events, important events, such as Valery Rosov trying to break his own world record. And written news reports are found in newspapers, magazines, or online. So there are 3 different types of written news that you can access these days. Years ago, before the internet, before computers, there just used to be print newspapers, the more traditional form, and you can still get those now. And you have 3 examples here of journalistic writing where it can be presented. So you have the traditional form of print newspapers where you can go to the shop and buy the newspapers. Some of your parents may still do that now. Others of your parents may use the computer or a tablet to see their news, such as this one. Or some people, I tend to do this quite a lot, I pick up the news on my phone and see my newspapers and all the news that I want on my phone, but they're all written types of news originally. So all newspaper reports have a purpose, audience, language, and layout. Let's look at each one of these because you're going to be shortly having a checklist that you're going to have to populate, which is going to be your checklist and your guideline that's going to help you write your report. So every newspaper report has to have a purpose, a reason the text is written. And your reason is going to be to report on Valery's attempt at the world record. The audience, always going to have someone who wants to read it. So who are you going to write for? And language. Now, the language that you use in a newspaper report is more formal, and it will have journalistic phrases. And the journalistic phrases often introduce direct and reported speech, which we're going to look at next week. And then there's always a layout, a structure of how you're going to lay it out. Now, when you first write a report and submit it to your class teachers, you're just going to do it as we always do in class. But when we come to publish, after you've written it all, you might want to think about how you are going to lay your pages out. Because if you remember, if you look at these newspapers, they're all laid out in slightly different ways. And you might decide that you want to, when you're presenting yours, you might want to lay it out this way. If you remember when we did our information non-chronological report on homelessness, when we published that one, then you thought about the structure and you mapped it out beforehand and thought about what pictures you were going to use. That's something you might want to consider once you're ready to publish, but that's the end of next week yet. But every newspaper report has to have a purpose, an audience, consider the language, and consider the layout. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to watch this link to remind you of what you need to include in a newspaper report. Now, this is Sonali Shah. She's a journalist, and she's a journalist with the BBC, and she is going to talk you through writing a journalistic report. And she talks a lot about the structure that you need. So if I was you, I'd have a piece of paper, I'd watch it and make notes on what she suggests that you use for the structure of your report. It's very useful, very informative, and you may want to watch it a couple of times. When you think you've got enough information, you can move on to the next part of the lesson. And the next part of the lesson, year 6, is where you're actually going to use that information that you've got from the video, and you're going to think about what else there is in a report that's going to help you. So you could have already, before you even do this, look at the notes you've made and think, what's really important about my newspaper report? Well, I need to think here. I'm possibly thinking about, well, it needs a title, and then it needs specific paragraphs. Now, I'm not going to fill that one in, because if you have given a lot of thought to the video that you've done, made some notes, she very clearly explains to you the structure and of how a newspaper report should be. So you can populate this already with that. Then I would be looking at this report. This is a report for another extreme sport, and it's a man called Alain Robert. He's French, and he actually scales, he's an urban climber. He scales buildings in the center of cities without a rope and without a safety net. He just climbs up them. Very dangerous, but he's very skilled. Now, I want you to read this. You'll notice that there's a structure here. You'll notice that you've got the who, what, why, where, and when at the start with. You know that you've got your main body of your paragraphs, and you know you've got your final paragraph. That's exactly what we've already talked about. But what else is there? And I'll be looking at this thinking, there's a lot of detail and there's factual. It's in the past tense, so I'll be thinking about that. And I'll be thinking about, are there any speech marks? Have they used any of the grammatical terms that we have already talked about? Can you spot any expanded noun phrases? Can you spot any relative clauses that add detail? Remember when we did the piano and you looked at the different ways of adding detail to a piece of writing? Have any of those ways been used in this report? If so, you might think they're important enough to add to your journalistic checklist. So year 6, that is what you're going to do. Your task is to use all the knowledge you've been given in the video and what you can pick out here to create your checklist that's going to help you when you start to do your writing, and it'll certainly help you in your task that I'm going to give you for tomorrow. So when you have completed this checklist and it's full, then the lesson is over, year 6. And I'd like you, as always, to submit it to your class teacher at the end of the day. So that is the end of today's lesson, and I will see you tomorrow.